Hello, good evening, friends. Thank you and welcome to another segment of your show, DEPORTEE'S Corner. We're happy to bring to you this evening another show this Thursday, which will be in English moving forward. Today, we have a very important topic that we would like to discuss with you, a topic that affects so many people. Again, this is Juan Hidon Sanchez speaking to you from Deportee's Corner. This is a podcast where we share the stories of immigrants, their struggles and triumphs, in an attempt to ensure that we can learn from each other. And it's very important that we start tonight by reminding you again, this show is for educational purposes, it's not legal advice. If you seek legal advice, you need to make an appointment with our offices or seek help from an attorney. We're more than happy to be bringing these discussions to the table as the topic that we'll be discussing tonight affects so many families. So please share this information. Make sure that you continue to tune in to hear more stories. So, we're going to start tonight by discussing one of the biggest issues and one of the big developments that we've seen this week in terms of immigration. And that brings us to the question of today. What should I do if I have been the victim of wage theft? Wage theft, we discussed previously, is something that affects the economy in so many different ways. Billions of dollars are lost each year to wage theft by employers. And as you will learn from tonight's discussion, we will see that it's not only limited to immigrants or employees who are being cheated out of their income. It also affects businesses who are trying to compete in an even playing field for contracts. And unfortunately, they lose these contracts because other companies use cheap labor to obtain contracts. So this affects the economy from the top down. But of course, the most vulnerable population is the undocumented and those who are here without a status, who are working for less than minimum wage. So I guess before we even begin, sort of discussing, right? Because some people may have some questions about what is wage theft. And wage theft can, take many forms. But as you guys know, if you work over 40 hours a week, that would be considered wage theft. If you are working overtime and are not being paid adequately, time and a half, that is wage theft. Now, this all depends in which state you live. There's different minimum wage rules. For instance, here in Connecticut, minimum wage is $15 an hour. Now, let's just see a little bit more definitions about wage theft and what is wage theft, right? So again, as we discussed, is being paid less than the minimum wage. So if here in Connecticut, you are required by law to be paid $15 an hour, but you're being paid $10 an hour, $11 an hour, this would qualify as wage theft. It would also, again, be not paying workers overtime and not allowing workers to take meal and rest breaks, requiring off-the-clock work, and or taking workers' tips. And this brings me to one of our stories of tonight, especially when it comes to construction. We have heard of many cases where an undocumented individual will do work for a person or a business. And when it comes time to receive payment, they are tricked in the sense that they will tell them, hey, you can come over and get your money. But by the time that the person shows up, they have either called immigration or the police, and the person ends up being deported. Now that they're back in their home country, they are pretty much lost out because they were not paid for the work that they performed, and they are now deported back home. And this is obviously very, very, very sad. So tonight we'll be discussing again what to do if you're the victim of wage theft and some of the options that are available to you, particularly now with this exciting announcement that has been announced by the Department of Homeland Security to tackle this very issue. And again, as we discussed, this has to do a lot with businesses who are able to win bids over other corporations that are abiding by the law. And again, oftentimes they're able to win these contracts because they're paying their employees less. So this is a huge, huge, huge problem. And again, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. You can always give us a call, either at the number that you see on your screen or on WhatsApp. Our phone number is 203-572-6748. If you call and we don't answer, please leave a message. We'll be sure to return any and all phone calls. And remember that this topic of immigration deals with federal law. So if you're in California, if you are in Florida, if you are in Ohio, if you're in Texas, regardless of where you are, there are labor laws to protect workers, regardless of legal status. And again, you may have been a victim of wage theft, even if you are documented. Even if you're a citizen or a green card holder, this does not discriminate on status. But for today's purposes, we will be discussing what the law has done to be able to protect immigrants who find themselves in this country and, again, who are afraid of coming forward and cooperating. Because in the example or story that we gave, if you perform work and you're asking for pay and someone threatens to call cops or to call immigration, call ICE, usually people will say, hey, I don't want any problems. Just, I'll either take less pay or no pay while that person has benefited from the fruits of your labor. And that is very difficult, again, when you are working so hard for your money, when you have a family to feed, when you have rent to pay, you've pumped gas. In some cases, you even buy material for these jobs. And it's not only limited to construction. It can be in factories, it can be in landscaping, it can be in any industry. So if you're a farm worker, any type of industry, and you have suffered wage theft, you have rights. And we'll be discussing some of those options. But I also wanted to give more examples of what wage theft looks like. So again, we spoke about minimum wage, which varies by state. So again, if you live in California, wage is different than it would be in New York, as it would be in Texas, Florida, and so forth. One of the things that many of the folks that we serve here in our office in Stratford, Connecticut, have told us are employers who do devious deductions. They do these fraudulent deductions. So they'll say, hey, if you have $500 a week per se, they'll say, I have to take taxes out. Yet at the end of the year, they never give you a W-2. So in essence, they're making deductions of your weekly paychecks, and they're taking that money for themselves and not necessarily taking it to pay federal tax, state tax, or FICA, which would include Social Security and Medicare deductions for tax purposes. Another one that we've seen or heard about is, hey, I have to make a deduction because I'm providing health insurance for you or workers' comp insurance for you. However, the person is never given a card of health benefits or any kind of documentation to prove that indeed any wage garnishments are actually going to any of those stated statements. Some people will say, hey, I have to make a deduction from your paycheck because I'm buying life insurance for you. And again, you're never shown the policy, you're never shown any kind of documents or anything to prove to justify that your money is actually going to benefit you. Again, so whether it's in the case of taxes or someone is saying, life insurance, health insurance, whatever the case may be, they are not actually reporting this to the government, and they're actually just pocketing your hard earned money. So, again, regardless of where you are in the States, we're able to help you with the three options that we're going to be discussing, because it's very important that whether it's your family, your friends, someone you know, someone who's maybe have even been deported after being victimized by one of these employers who, again, calls immigration on you, calls the police on you, and results in you losing your pay and ultimately your freedom. There is now a way to help you. Do not be afraid. One of the main things that we see are people who are victimized and are afraid to come forward. They're afraid to come forward because of their immigration status. They're afraid to come forward because they don't know their rights. And they're afraid because, rightfully so, some of these employers will say, hey, I am the citizen. I am the green card holder. I'm the business owner. You have no rights because of your immigration status. And this doesn't discriminate. This happens to men and women. Again, year after year, billions upon billions of dollars are lost to wage theft. If you find yourself in the situation, you should continue to watch this video. Make sure you comment, you share, and again, educate yourself so that if this happens to you or someone you know, someone you love, someone you care about, that they know that they have options, regardless of your immigration status. And again, this would apply whether you're documented or undocumented. But for the benefit of tonight's conversation, these topics address more those individuals who are undocumented. So whether you have came to the border and were inspected by the Custom and Border Patrol or ICE or DHS, the government knows you're here, or you came through the border and no one knows you're here. Or in the case that you were inspected, meaning that you came through a port of entry, either by sea or by plane and with a visa, and you overstay and you've been working under the table or working for cash, this will still apply. Again, do not be afraid. If someone threatens you to call the police, the best thing you can do is say, please call the police. That would be even better for you, because now you will have documented proof and a report that will be written in regards to that situation. And oftentimes you will realize that these employers who are using these scare tactics will back down because they ultimately know that once it's recorded, there is more evidence that you will have against them. So do not be afraid to cooperate with the police. Or in this case, particularly what we will be discussing, the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Labor, as well as any agency with the authority to investigate a crime. Again, remember, wage theft is a crime. You work for your money, you deserve to have every penny. Because we know in these times of recession and of economic downturn worldwide, it hurts. It hurts our pockets and it hurts our families. Many people send money back to their home country. They have children that depend upon these funds. And when someone's taking your hard-earned money, that's less money that you have for yourself, for your bills, for your medical bills, and so forth. So you're not asking for anything that doesn't belong to you. It's very important that, again, if this happens, that you cooperate, and more than anything, that you have this conversation with members of your community. Again, it doesn't matter if you're Latino, if you're Asian, if you are Caribbean, if you are, African, European. Wage theft is something that affects all cultures, all people, all walks of life, from all types of industries. So it's very important, again, that we educate ourselves and that we have these conversations, because it's very sad. It's very, very sad when we see, how families are hurting, how people are taking advantage of them, and ultimately even the businesses that are doing things legally, and they end up losing contracts because an employer is using cheap labor to subsidize their expenses, and therefore more money in their pockets at the expense of the vulnerable. So again, if there's any questions or concerns, please feel free to comment, like, share. We would love to hear from you. Feel free again to share this video and have this conversation with other people. It's very important, again, that as a community, we inform ourselves, we educate ourselves, and that we put a stop to wage theft. Now, again, we are able to help you regardless of where you are in this country. You could be in Hawaii, you could be in Alaska, you could be anywhere in Puerto Rico, for instance. There's a lot of people in Puerto Rico as well, from all over the world, all over the Caribbean as well, who encounter these types of issues. Again, work discrimination, wage theft is a huge problem. And our team here is very experienced in these types of cases that we'll be discussing. But I think, one of the main things that we'll be discussing right now is the new rule by the Department of Homeland Security and enforcing new measures to help address this specific issue. Now, we will continue to see, DHS support of the enforcement of labor and employment laws, reads the article. The Department of Homeland Security plays an important role ensuring that our nation's workplaces comply with our laws by supporting federal, state, and local labor and employment agencies to accomplish their important work of enforcing wage protections, workplace safety, labor rights, and other laws and standards. Okay. Now, for us, this is like, a huge development in having this announcement being made and being formalized. We'll now look at an article that was published, in this case by the Nevada Current, in which the Homeland Security formalized the process that won immigrant workers a $3 million settlement. Unauthorized workers gain a clear path to protections from employer retaliation. So again, we were discussing earlier how many people are afraid to speak up because of the consequences and the threats that they live under. Now, this organization, which is Accept My Labor, Protect My Rights, was advocating, and this is a huge victory for these labor organizers. And again, as the Department of Homeland Security announced, that there will be streamlining a process, giving workers a clear, accessible path to request protection from immigration-related intimidation by abusive employers. Now, effectively and immediately, the new process will expedite requests for deportation relief, such as deferred action, parole, or stay of removal for unauthorized workers who are victims or witnesses to the violation of labor rights. So if you are, again, documented and you see something wrong happening, it's almost like the campaign, if you see something, say something, right? We have to gather together. So if you work in a factory, or if you work in a farm, if you work for any employer and you're seeing that this is happening, as a group, as a collective, you can come together and file a report, file a complaint, and receive the protection. So again, if you, without the fear of retaliation and without the fear of immigration consequences. So again, you will receive deferred action or parole and stay of removal. Now, this announcement comes 6 months after labor officials published a list of requirements workers must meet to secure support from government officials when seeking deportation relief through an investigation of unlawful conduct by employers. Officials of the Department of Homeland Security said that the agency's practice of offering protections is on a case-by-case basis to unauthorized workers directly increase the ability of labor and employment agencies to more fully investigate worksite violations and hold abusive employers accountable. Now, this is a very good point, because it doesn't just apply towards employers who are directly to employers. This can also apply to employment agencies. We have seen and heard of many instances of employment agencies being directly responsible for even providing fraudulent documentation to workers. This includes fraudulent green cards, fraudulent social security numbers. And again, this is kind of a catch 20, right? In the sense of, you're here undocumented, you want to work, but getting fraudulent documents to work is a big no-no. Not only are you utilizing an identity of perhaps a U.S. citizen, which is even worse, or a green card holder, but you're lying as far as when it comes to employment documentation. And this can have huge consequences. But again, in cooperating and in reporting these types of violations will help protect you. And one of the main things that is being that is part of this new program with DHS is the ability to obtain a 2-year sort of safety measure in which you will be allowed to remain here peacefully, again, without that fear of being removed. You will also be given a work authorization document, a work permit, an EAD, and a social, which will allow you to work legally or under some type of authority that is authorized by the federal government. So that way you will be complying with the state and federal requirements. While during the course of the investigation, again, you are cooperating throughout the investigation and receiving this immigration benefit. And now, this is not the only benefit or the only recourse available to people who are, again, victims of wage theft. Another process that can help individuals is the U visa. Now, U visa we are discussing next because with DHS and making this announcement, it has allowed for the streamline these types of applications. So it is on a case-by-case basis, but your case will be processed faster. With U visa, there are delays of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and it takes a really long time. And for some people it can be very frustrating, but it's under some of the same criteria. And this doesn't just apply for wage theft. U visas also have to do with victims of criminal activity, and as such, wage theft is one of these activities that qualifies. The U non-immigrant status, or U visa, is set aside for victims of certain crimes who have suffered mental and physical abuse and are helpful to law enforcement or government officials in the investigation or prosecution of criminal activity. The Congress enacted the U non-immigrant visa with the passage of the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, including the Battered Immigrant Women's Protection Act in October of 2000. The legislation was intended to strengthen the ability of law enforcement agencies to investigate and prosecute cases of domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking of non-citizens, and other crimes, while also protecting victims of crimes who have suffered substantial mental and physical abuse due to the crime and who are willing to help law enforcement and authorities in the investigation and prosecution of the criminal activity. The legislation also helps law enforcement agencies to better serve victims of crimes. Now, there are particular eligibilities, and again, this is all for educational purposes. If you need your case assessed, the number is right here below. Will be more than happy to help you. Again, our phone number is 203-572-6748, or you can call our 866 number that's there on your screen. Again, regardless of where you are in Hawaii, in Alaska, in California, Arizona, Texas, we can help. Or you can call any attorney to seek some protections and some action to see if you can qualify for some of these benefits. So whether it's a DHS benefit, which we just talked about, or now second, the U visa benefit based on, again, of being a victim of wage theft. You will have to cooperate with the Department of Labor, whether it's the State Department of Labor or the Federal Department of Labor, to continue to investigate and to make yourself available. Again, a lot of people don't want to be labeled as snitches or as cooperating with the feds or with police officers. But again, you have to think about it this way. You are the victim here. Your employer, again, if you qualify under one of these situations, again, wage theft is a topic, right? So again, we're going to go through again what wage theft means. It means that someone's taking your hard-earned money through dubious means, telling you that they're going to pay taxes with it and never give you a W-2, that they're going to pay an insurance for you, that they are paying life insurance for you. Or in some cases, they'll say, hey, I will pay you next week. If I'm gonna pay you $500 a week, I'm gonna only pay you 100, and I'll say next week I'll pay you the other money. Next week roll around, you get paid another $100, and now you're down $800. Third week comes in, you work, and the person disappears. So now that person is left with $1,800 of your hard-earned money, while you're sitting there struggling to pick up the pieces. As we know, in these difficult times, every penny counts. Wage theft is a shameless crime, but unfortunately, many of us suffer from that situation. And one of the saddest part is that many of the employers who tend to abuse immigrants are people from our own countries, are immigrants themselves, who are cheating immigrants out of their fair or hard-earned money. And we got to think again, if you're sending money back home, if you're paying for rent, if you're paying gas, if you have to really make a decision between you eating or you paying rent, this is real. So the fact that you're losing out money to someone like this is shameless. And again, the best thing that you can do is make yourself available to cooperate, to comply with any investigation, whether again is the Department of Labor or any other agency authorized to investigate these crimes. You should not be afraid. You should make yourself available to explore what your rights are. Again, you're not asking for charity. You're asking for something that's completely your right. Okay. Now, the last of the benefits, again, we've discussed the new DHS program, which would allow immigrants to apply if you've been victim of wage theft, which will result again in a stay of removal or parole, in which you can have up to 2 years at peace while the investigation is in place. You'll be able to get a work permit. You'll be able to get a social right away. We've just discussed U visas, and now we'll be discussing, last but not least, T visas. Now, T visas are, let's see, I'm just waiting for it to load here. T visas are also a benefit that we can access through the Department of Homeland Security and the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. With T visas, and a lot of people are not that familiar with it, you have to be a victim of severe form of trafficking. You were brought to the U.S. for commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion, and you were under 18. Now, where this applies now with the wage theft is that you were made to work for someone through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, death, bondage, or slavery. The situation where this happens a lot is when people come here to America and they're being told that they have to pay back their debt to either a loan shark, a coyote, or a trafficking network, or a cartel. So if you were brought here by one of these criminal organizations or through black market economy and you owe a debt, they'll say, hey, you have to work at my restaurant for 5 years until you pay off your debt, or you have to work at this factory. And again, you're being denied your rights under labor laws of both state and the federal government, and the protections again of your wage stuff, because the same things happen. So you're working, let's say for $15 an hour, but then because you're paying back at that, they're only paying you $8 an hour, for instance. This happens quite a lot, and this may be your story. It's definitely has been the story of many people who have been deported again because they were afraid to act. They were afraid to raise their voices and unfortunately find themselves now deported back home. Now, again, do not be afraid. We are here to help. Please feel free to call our numbers. Please feel free to share our information. You can find us on social media. You can text us through WhatsApp. It will be confidential. And this is the important thing again about this process or these process is that you are cooperating directly with the government. No one can guarantee you what the outcome is going to be, but you making yourself available, you getting the right legal help and the right support and the right team as you would have here with us can guarantee and improve your odds of finally achieving your goal of legalizing your status, addressing your immigration uh, issue, and stop living in the shadows, living a freer life, a fuller life without fear, without intimidation, and without this unfairness that, again, is plaguing our community, especially now in a time of recession, in a time of economic depression, to not allow your money to just be taken away from you. Okay? Now, you for the T visas, you must have physical presence here in the US as a result of trafficking. And again, you complied with reasonable requests for assistance in investigation and prosecution. And you will suffer an extreme hardship upon being removed from the United States. Because again, many immigrants who leave their home country are leaving very difficult situations, especially now if they're here and they've built a life together, if they've built a life for themselves. A lot of people have cars, they have homes, they have businesses, they have children who were born here in this country. It would be such a hardship to uproot all of the sacrifice, all of the hard work that you've done to have to go back to your home country to start all over again. Again, when it comes to T visas, it applies to different types of crimes, but we're discussing tonight labor trafficking, which again is when someone recruits, harbors, transports, provides, or obtains a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of involuntary servitude, peonage, death, bondage, or slavery. Now, friends, thank you so much for joining us tonight in this conversation. Again, if you know of anyone, a loved one, family, friends, anyone who's going through this situation, please feel free to share this information. The best thing that we can do, again, is to cooperate with law enforcement, cooperate with the federal government, with the state government, with your local Department of Labor to ensure that these individuals who are, again, rightfully taking what's yours. You're not asking or begging for something that's not yours. It's your hard-earned money. This is your fruits of your labor, your sweat, your pain. You know how hard it is to be here for all of us, even us who are here with status. Every penny counts. You should not allow someone to just take it away from you. That's like having someone just take food off your table, especially if you're trying to feed your kids. That is unacceptable. We have to come together as a community to address wage theft, to make sure that these employers know that there are serious consequences and that they are investigated so that they can be restitution, so that people can be made whole. If you are owed money, whether again, if you have done cash business or getting paid under the table, whether you're doing construction and people owe you money, or you're a roofer and installed a roof and they haven't paid you, or you've done siding, or you've done landscaping. I mean, the stories go on and on and on and on. You do work and then people turn around and threaten you. You have rights. Again, this is Juan Hiron Sanchez from Noise and Associates. We're happy to bring to you this podcast and this conversation so that you can, again, inform your family, your friends, your community that there is help available. So whether there's DHS, there's U visa, and there's T visas, there may be something to help you. The only way to find out is for you to call our offices or call any attorney and become educated about what your options are. Do not leave your money on the table. Do not just take it as a loss. There's too many people who they're owed thousands upon thousands of dollars. And again, in the case as the story that we gave, people who are even deported because an employer reported them to immigration. Again, whether it's through DHS, through U visas, or through T visas, there may be some kind of immigration relief to you. You may be able to obtain finally that green card that you have dreamt of, whether it's through T visas or U visas, or whether it's a work permit, a social, being able to travel back home. Make sure that you share this information with your family and friends. Make sure that we are educating each other, that we're helping each other. And when we see things that are wrong, if you see something, you say something. This will be all for tonight. We look forward to seeing you again next Thursday for another edition of DEPORTEE'S CORNER. Tuesdays, we will be doing these in Spanish. And starting next week, we will be doing this also in Portuguese. So we'll see how that goes. So we'll be coming to you. We'll always be discussing the same topic, just in 3 different languages. We just found it easier to divide it that way. So again, Tuesdays, it will be Spanish. Wednesdays will be Portuguese, and Thursdays will be in English. If you have any questions, please feel free to write us a comment, give us a call. Again, there may be relief for you. Do not be afraid. Get out of the shadows and live the fuller life that you deserve. Thank you.